Believe that the order in which you are born does affect not only who you are, but who you become to be. We've got Danielle Applegate joining us from Compass Counseling and Consulting. And let's talk a little bit about birth order, because so many people, think that this really does affect their personalities in major ways.
Yeah, and oftentimes it does. I mean, like you're going to hear from the professor, it's not etched in stone. It's not all the time. But the traits can certainly be there. For instance, the firstborn child is usually going to be the most dominant of the group. They're going to take a leadership role. They're going to assume all the responsibility. They're going to become very sort of anal and how they do things, whereas the middle child may feel inferior to that first child. Maybe not as much attention is being paid to the middle child and subsequent children as well.
And we're taking a look at some of the traits for a second child.
Yeah.
Seeking to differ from the first child, maybe a bit of that rebellious streak in them as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's that, and it's also just trying to forge an identity. It's a lot of times, depending on the age gap as well, the older child may not include the younger siblings as much into their world. And so the middle child or the second child may need to carve something out for themselves.
Sure.
And then, yeah, the rebellious streak is going to be there, obviously, because you've probably seen those memes. The older child is made the rules, the middle child is why there are rules, and then there are no rules for the younger child. And yeah, then the competition streak too, and that again just comes from trying to forge their own identity and to keep up with the older sibling.
Sure. Let's talk about that last child now too, because a lot of times people think that they are the babies and they get babied.
Yeah, the last child is going to have no sense of responsibility. If responsibility comes to them, it's going to come much, much later in life. And that's because the parents are traditionally going to be just more lax on the rules. They're not going to pay attention to every little ache and pain or every cough or sniffle. And so the attention that the youngest is getting is not going to be the same. And so they're constantly going to be striving for attention. They become, they feel inferior to their other siblings as well. And so what you often find are the youngers, or the last child's being more creative. You see the younger children like Robin Williams or Steve Carell, or people who just sort of command an audience and try to make everybody laugh and become the center of attention.
Now, I think maybe this begs the question, well, why do parents tend to treat children like this?
In the defense of the parents, I think they're just kind of making it up and figuring it out as they go along. They have their first child, and everything is a catastrophe. Every little thing that happens is going to warrant a ton of attention. And so as they have more children, they realize, oh, well, that's just a sniffle. That's nothing that we need to run to the doctor for.
Sure.
Or, oh, you fell and you scraped your knee. That's okay. I know what to do now. Instead of running you off to the emergency room, I know I've got some Neosporin, and so they're learning how to parent, and they get busier. All of a sudden they don't just have one kid and a job and responsibilities. They have 2 kids or 3 kids and a job and responsibilities. So laziness a little bit maybe, but also just, confidence. I've got this. I know that my kid's going to be okay.
And we talk about the rules changing for, different kids as they're born. But what about for the only children? What do we see? What kind of stereotypes do we see for those children?
Oh, the only child is almost definitely going to be spoiled and pampered. And that makes sense. I mean, especially if a couple has a child later in life and they decide we're only going to have one kid, this is it.
All their resources can kind of go there.
Right, yeah. And they also become very self-centered. They get very good at being independent and being alone, but they also become very particular. A lot of times with only children, you see a sense of independence happening much, much earlier. Like maybe 13, 14-year-olds think that they should be dating 20 or 25-year-olds because the 12 or 13-year-olds that are in their school just don't understand. And, the only child is smarter. And they kind of feel like they're on a little bit of a different level.
And I almost forgot about this one, which seems fitting. The middle child.
Yeah. Yeah, the middle child is going to be super creative. The middle child is going to be fighting for as much love and attention as they can get, because they're going to feel unloved and left out a lot. Because the older child is the leader, the younger child is likely not following the rules and getting a lot of attention, him or herself, just because of acting out and things like that. So the middle child, they don't get enough attention. They're constantly seeking approval. And we kind of call that middle child syndrome.
What about when birth order gets disrupted at all, as far as maybe an adoption or, God forbid, the death of a sibling or a family member?
Yeah.
This can really cause turmoil in a family.
Oh, sure. And we saw 2 teenage suicides in the last 10 days. And my God, for those parents and their siblings, that's the first thing that I thought of when we started talking about this. But first, it's important to know if there's a 5-year gap in the birth order doesn't really apply.
Okay.
It sort of starts over. So that's the first time the birth order can be disrupted. For an adopted kid, it's important maybe not to disrupt the birth order of your children or of the adopted child, right? So if you bring an 11-year-old in as an adoptee, and you already have a 9-year-old who's established him or herself as the leader of the family and the leader of the pack, that's going they're all of a sudden they're going to be competing and fighting for dominance, right? Yeah. So
and that can really disrupt the cohesiveness.
it sure can. And then, of course, a death of a child is the most traumatic thing of all. And what families experience there isn't so much birth order disruption as much as it is just entire disruption of everyday life
Just
as
pure
they know it.
tragedy.
Absolutely. What you do often find, though, if there are only 2 kids and one child does pass, all of a sudden all the attention goes on the child that's left. And so they can become overprotected and very coddled. And if they were independent, that's going to get squashed because parents are going to feel like there's the same thing is going to happen to their other child.
All right. All right, Danny, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Time now for